We're starting a focused examination of the material you provided today, and it addresses one of the most complex and ultimately tragic cases you'll find at the intersection of professional sports, military life, and domestic violence.
It's really not just a straightforward legal case. When you look at the sources, what you have is a profound social document. It requires us to synthesize a dense biography, a military background that was supposed to promise discipline, and then this really intense world of professional bodybuilding.
And a murder conviction that has seen, what, nearly 3 decades of legal challenges?
Exactly.
Our examination centers on Sally Marie McNeil. She's widely known as a former Marine sergeant and a bodybuilder who was convicted of killing her husband, Ray McNeil, on Valentine's Day in 1995. The sources, they paint a very stark picture. It's a life where high professional achievement just brutally collided with this relentless generational cycle of extreme violence.
The mission for us is clear. We have to analyze the entire arc of Sally McNeil's life, from her troubled youth and her early military career, right up to the immediate circumstances of the shooting, and then the really intricate legal battles that followed.
And to do that, to truly understand this, we have to proceed with a strict adherence to the facts provided. We'll need a highly analytical chronological structure.
That structural approach is crucial here. We have to look at how different pressures, financial, professional, domestic, how they all converge to create this outcome. It's not just about that final act, it's about the decades of pressure that led up to it.
Right, and we can't underestimate the role of the subculture they were in.
Absolutely not.
Oh.
We have to analyze the specific pressures that are really unique to professional bodybuilding. You've got the financial stakes, the physical transformation, and the significant, dangerous role of steroid use. These factors were inseparable from the dynamic of their relationship.
Okay, let's unpack this. We'll begin with Sally McNeil's early life and the environment that, well, that fundamentally shaped her worldview.
If we look at the foundation, the sources describe a difficult upbringing. Sally Dempsey, born in Allentown, Pennsylvania in 1960, she explicitly characterized her childhood as tough. More specifically, it was characterized by frequent violence.
And what really stands out in the sources isn't just that the violence happened, but her interpretation of it. She apparently believed this level of fighting, this abuse, this conflict, she thought it was completely commonplace, that it happened in every home she knew.
It was normalized for her.
Yes.
That normalization is a key insight into her later behaviors and her reactions. We learn that her father, Richard Dale Dempsey, was an alcoholic who frequently abused her mother. So this established a brutal pattern in her formative years, basically teaching her that conflict resolution often involved physical confrontation.
Despite this unstable environment, she did pursue athletic outlets. The sources say she attended DeRoof High School, and she was good. She excelled in swimming, diving, and track and field. She even sought a professional career in physical education, enrolling at East Stroudsburg State College.
But here we see the first major instance where financial limitations dictate her path. She had to drop out after 3.5 years. The reason? She ran out of money. That dream of being a gym teacher, it just ended due to a lack of funds, and that forced a major pivot in her life.
So she sought structure, discipline somewhere else. She followed her brother and her uncle into the United States Marine Corps at Camp Pendleton, and she was clearly capable within this highly disciplined environment. She achieved the rank of sergeant.
Yes, she achieved rank, but the sources indicate the discipline of the Marines. It couldn't fully suppress the behavioral issues that were rooted in her past. We see a significant red flag in 1990. She was actually demoted from sergeant due to a record of continuously poor behavior.
What did that poor behavior consist of specifically?
The sources cite anger issues, violence, and documented instances of lashing out at others. This pattern of conduct was severe enough that when her tour was up in 1993, she was prohibited from re-enlisting. This is crucial. A structure designed for discipline ultimately rejected her because of this persistent volatility.
And this volatility, it manifested early in her personal relationships as well. It led to legal trouble before she even met Ray McNeil. She met her first husband, Anthony Loudon, while at Parris Island. They were married for 4 years, and during that time they had 2 children, Shantina and John, and there was also a third child she placed for adoption.
And she claimed that Loudon became abusive toward the end of their marriage, which mirrors the violence she witnessed as a child. This led to her filing for divorce. But her reaction to the abuse, it just underscores this pattern of resorting to aggressive physical responses.
We have 2 highly specific prior arrests documented in the source material that really confirm this tendency. One was in 1990. She was arrested for brandishing a firearm at Loudon and also smashing his car windows with a metal bar. That's an extreme reaction to a domestic dispute.
It is. And the other instance, which happened earlier, involved an assault on a mailman. This happened after the mailman had slapped her son, John, following a fight between the two kids. Now, in her mind, she was defending her child, but her method was immediately physically aggressive. This history becomes vital later on because the prosecution used this pattern to argue that violence was her chosen default response, not just a reaction to an imminent threat.
So the stage is set. Volatility, financial struggle. Now we transition into the world of professional bodybuilding, which, paradoxically, promised stability, but then introduced a whole new set of financial and psychological pressures.
And what's fascinating here is how her professional life, defined by muscle and discipline, became completely tied to a very unconventional and taxing income stream. And this was explicitly designed to finance Ray's career goals.
Her entry into bodybuilding began in 1987, while she was still stationed at Camp Pendleton, and she had immediate tangible success. She placed fourth in her very first competition that February. She later went on to win the U.S. Armed Services Physique Championship twice.
This just confirms her dedication and, her genetic suitability for the sport. And it was through this environment that she met Ray McNeil in June of 1987. He was also a competitive bodybuilder. The sources indicate a remarkably fast courtship. They were married only 2 months after they started dating.
2 months.
Just 2.
So by 1990, after they relocated to Oceanside, California with the children, the severe financial pressures of the sport really took hold. Bodybuilding is incredibly costly. I mean, the required nutrition, the supplements, training fees, travel for competitions. It's not a hobby for someone who is financially insecure.
Not at all. And both of them aspired to go professional, but they just couldn't afford it.
This financial necessity is what drove Sally into her second career, one that was highly specialized and incredibly demanding. McNeil began wrestling men on video for significant pay up to $300 an hour, which earned her the professional moniker Killer Sally.
And her work went beyond just video. She was a female submission wrestler, and she performed what the sources call muscle worship sessions. The financial incentive must have been immense to justify that kind of work.
It was. The sources are careful to explain the nature of the transaction. While these acts were inherently sexual and fetishistic for the buyers, McNeil specifically denied having sexual relations during them. She expressed a clear dislike for the job, stating she didn't enjoy it, but her assessment was dramatic. The high income it generated completely outweighed what she labeled the dark side of the profession.
And that income, that was the bedrock of their family's professional ambition. The sources confirm it was significant enough to allow Ray to leave the Marines and focus solely full-time on his own bodybuilding career. Sally became the primary and very unconventional breadwinner, making her instrumental to Ray's success.
This financial arrangement, it kind of inverted traditional power dynamics, but it also must have placed immense psychological strain on Sally. She was sacrificing her dignity and comfort to support Ray, which could have created a subtle resentment underlying their whole relationship.
And then there's the other element in that environment, performance-enhancing drugs. Ray began using steroids, which Sally later explicitly cited as the accelerant for his increasing violence. She often referred to it as roid rage.
And Sally was not an innocent bystander in the drug aspect of it all. She admitted to significant involvement. She traveled to Tijuana, Mexico, frequently, often with her young children in the car, to purchase steroids.
Right, and she was buying them both for her own use and to sell at the gym, furthering this whole financial enterprise. She later expressed deep regret about it, stating she considered this bad parenting.
But despite the toxicity of this environment, Ray's career did see success, which in a way confirmed the utility of Sally's sacrifices. In 1991, he won the MPC California and North American Championships. That moved him onto the global stage. By 1993, he competed in the prestigious Mr. Olympia competition, placing 15th.
So we have a very complex setup here. A woman with a history of violence is supporting a successful, volatile husband through a degrading income stream. Both are engaged in steroid use, and all of this is happening under the same roof where their young children lived.
And this is where it gets incredibly disturbing. The sources paint a picture of just relentless escalation in the violence within the marriage. It often started immediately after their rushed wedding. This is the marital descent.
The timeline of the abuse is shocking. McNeil alleged the physical abuse began only 3 days after marrying Ray. It started with him choking and punching her. This establishes the pattern almost immediately.
She testified under oath during the trial, and she detailed the relentless nature of this violence. She claimed she received numerous significant injuries over the course of the marriage, I mean, 5 broken bones.
The accounts are brutal. In one especially distressing incident, she recounted fighting back against Ray, which only enraged him further. He responded by beating her worse, and that resulted in a broken rib and a punctured lung. That detail is crucial because it showed her that resistance only escalated the violence, which could potentially confirm her learned helplessness or the battered woman syndrome later on.
And the abuse was pervasive. It extended beyond physical assault. McNeil testified that Ray sexually abused her throughout their marriage, forcing sex despite her denials. The violence wasn't just confined to moments of anger, it was a systemic part of their marital dynamic.
It's hard to overstate the damage done to the children. The sources show this clearly, and it continued to haunt them for decades. They weren't just living near the abuse, they were witnesses, and tragically, they were victims themselves.
Both children, Shantina and John, they claimed they witnessed Ray being physically abusive towards McNeil repeatedly.
Shantina's testimony was particularly powerful and specific. She claimed to have seen Ray choke her mother, and she specifically witnessed Ray breaking McNeil's nose right in front of her. This incident was so serious that it was reported to Ray's superiors in the Marine Corps, and he was briefly detained.
But the outcome of that intervention was terrifying. McNeil claimed that after Ray was released, he immediately beat her until she promised to drop the charges. This failure of the system, where intervention only led to greater personal danger, it just further reinforced the idea that she had to handle this problem herself.
In John's account, it details his own victimization. He stated that when McNeil was away, Ray would become abusive toward them. He described a chilling, ritualistic punishment. When the children were in trouble, Ray would bring them into a room and spank them severely with a belt while making the other sibling watch, using fear and coercion to maintain control.
Ray's tendency toward extreme violence wasn't limited to the home either. His friend, Dwayne D.J. Jeffers, corroborated Ray's propensity for violence in his outside life, which gives critical context for understanding Sally's fear of him.
Jeffers recalled an incident where Ray, working as a bouncer at a nightclub, got into a confrontation and, in an act of just staggering brutality, gouged his fingers through another man's eyes.
Wow.
Shantina, McNeil's daughter, she confirmed this event. She remembered seeing Ray come home covered in blood afterwards. The sources indicate Ray justified this by telling her he had to do it because the men were trying to kill him, suggesting a heightened paranoia or defensive rage.
The marriage was just spiraling. Ray's infidelity became the final, immediate catalyst. Ray began an affair with Marianne Myers and eventually left McNeil for her.
And this leads directly into the events of Valentine's Day. Ray had arranged to spend the evening with Myers, his mistress. Significantly, Ray told his friend D.J. Jeffers that he had informed McNeil that he was ending their relationship. And this disclosure is what prompted Jeffers to warn Ray.
Jeffers apparently knew the situation was combustible. The source states he warned Ray about the sawed-off shotgun in the house, explicitly raising the possibility that Sally might shoot him. Tragically, Ray just dismissed the warning, laughed it off.
And that warning, which Ray chose to ignore, it just hangs over the entire narrative. It suggests the level of danger was known to those on the periphery, yet dismissed by the person most at risk.
So this is the climax of the narrative, February 14th, 1995. This part of our analysis demands careful attention because the sources provide profoundly conflicting interpretations of the forensic and the testimonial evidence.
The night began with deception. Ray had told McNeil he was just going out to get chicken for dinner, but he was actually on a date with Marianne Myers. He finally returned to the apartment late, after 10:30 p.m.
And shortly after his return, the Oceanside Emergency Services received the call from McNeil. The transcript of that call is immediate and defining. "I just shot my husband because he just beat me up." This is the core conflict, an admission of the act coupled instantly with the justification of self-defense.
McNeil's sustained claim throughout the police interviews and the trial was one of self-defense. She maintained that Ray, in a fit she attributed to roid rage, began choking her after she accused him of adultery.
The police transcript of her immediate account further details the sequence. Ray slapped her, pushed her down on the floor, and started choking her. She claims she squirmed away, ran into the bedroom, retrieved the sawed-off shotgun from his case in the closet, and then shot him twice.
And we have to pause there, because that physical sequence, squirming away, running to the closet, getting the weapon, and returning, that becomes the central point of contention in the courtroom. Did she escape the danger, or did she prepare for defense?
The forensic facts confirm Ray was shot twice, once in the abdomen and once in the jaw. Both children were in the apartment, in their own room, but they heard the shots. Shantina was the one who left her room, saw her stepfather's state, and ran to a neighbor for help.
Ray was still alive and conscious when the police arrived. He was transported to Scripps Memorial Hospital, but he was pronounced dead 2 hours later. McNeil was immediately arrested for murder.
Toxicology reports quickly became vital context for the environment of the shooting. At the time of her arrest, McNeil tested positive for the steroid decadurabolin.
But Ray's toxicology was far more damning, at least for the prosecution's attempt to paint him as just a victim. His autopsy revealed 5 different kinds of steroids in his bloodstream. This corroborated Sally's long-standing claim that steroid abuse was directly contributing to his instability and aggression, a factor that strengthened the defense's battered woman syndrome argument.
Despite the gravity of the crime, McNeil's bail was set at $100,000, and this is a powerful indicator of the loyalty she commanded. The bail was paid entirely by wrestling clients and members of the muscle worship community. That specific group provided the financial support.
So we move into the legal phase. The trial was the ultimate showdown between the narrative of self-defense rooted in years of trauma versus the hard physical evidence of the shooting scene.
The defense strategy, it hinged on the legal and psychological concept of battered woman syndrome, or BWS. They argued that McNeil suffered from this condition after years of unrelenting mental and physical abuse by Ray.
To understand why BWS is critical, we need to clarify what it allows the defense to argue. The expert defense testimony claimed that this diagnosis would have caused McNeil to genuinely perceive herself to be in imminent danger at the moment of the shooting, even if she had managed to momentarily escape Ray's physical grip and run into the bedroom.
And why is that distinction so important in a self-defense claim?
Crucially, standard self-defense requires that the threat be immediate and that the defendant has no means of safe retreat. BWS, when properly argued, it changes the standard of assessment. It argues that due to chronic abuse, the victim's ability to gauge danger is fundamentally altered. Their state of mind, governed by fear and years of repeated violence, dictates that running away to the bedroom only means they are delaying the inevitable and possibly worse attack.
So retrieving the weapon was, in their mind, the only way to save their life.
From the threat that they knew would follow them, yes.
And this was supported by Shantina's testimony. She testified powerfully in her mother's defense, stating she could hear Ray choking her mother through the door and recognized the sound from prior, non-fatal instances.
However, the prosecution systematically dismantled the immediate self-defense narrative using physical and forensic evidence. They presented a counter-narrative of cold, deliberate action.
What were the key pieces of evidence that challenged her story?
First, they pointed to her body language during the initial police interview, suggesting a lack of the panic and terror you would expect from a victim who had just fought for their life. But far more compelling was the forensic data.
Let's talk about the trajectory of the bullets.
The physical evidence, the bullet trajectory, and the location of the wounds strongly suggested that one of the shots must have been fired while Ray was already incapacitated or on the floor. This directly contradicted the idea of a continuous, immediate life-or-death struggle.
And there was also blood spatter analysis.
Correct. Blood spatter analysis on a living room lamp was used to reconstruct the sequence of events. The prosecution argued this evidence pointed away from a chaotic, single struggle. It suggested Ray was shot in different locations or positions, separated by a distinct period of time.
And the absence of evidence was used against her, too.
An absolutely vital point. No DNA of Sally's was found on Ray. The prosecution emphasized this. If Ray had been actively choking Sally just seconds before the shooting, you'd expect skin cells, scratches, or some DNA transfer on his hands or body. The absence of this forensic evidence significantly undermined her core claim.
Based on this forensic interpretation, the prosecution advanced a devastating argument. They proposed that McNeil had shot Ray first in the abdomen, then, seeing him wounded but perhaps still moving, she left the living room, went to the bedroom to reload the sawed-off shotgun, and then returned to shoot him a second time in the face.
And that theory was designed to shatter the BWS defense. If she reloaded the weapon, it implies a moment of deliberation, a break in the action. That transition transforms the act from justifiable self-defense into murder.
The jury ultimately sided with the prosecution's interpretation of the forensic evidence and the narrative of deliberation. In 1996, Sally McNeil was convicted of second-degree murder.
And she was sentenced to 19 years to life imprisonment. But the complexity of this case meant that the conviction was simply the beginning of a long, drawn-out legal fight.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the American justice system, the appeal process itself was a marathon. It stretched across multiple court levels for almost a decade. McNeil filed numerous appeals on various grounds, primarily challenging the legal instructions given to the jury regarding her BWS defense.
Her efforts saw temporary but huge victory in the early 2000s. The U.S. Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals initially overturned the conviction, granting what is known as a writ of habeas corpus.
For our listeners, can you clarify the significance of a writ of habeas corpus versus a standard appeal?
A standard appeal challenges errors made during the trial process itself, like improper evidence or procedures. A writ of habeas corpus is fundamentally different. It's a legal recourse used to challenge the legality of a person's detention. It essentially asks the court to determine if the state is holding the person in violation of their constitutional rights. The Ninth Circuit found that the way the trial court instructed the jury on the BWS defense was constitutionally flawed.
That's a major ruling for the defendant.
Yeah.
But the state of California didn't accept it.
Not at all. The state appealed that reversal, taking the highly unusual step of petitioning the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heard the case and, in 2004, reversed the Ninth Circuit's ruling.
So the Supreme Court reinstated the initial conviction.
Not immediately, but their ruling directed the lower court to use a specific higher legal standard when reviewing the case, a standard that makes overturning a state conviction on federal grounds much harder. The Supreme Court effectively disagreed with the Ninth Circuit's application of federal law to the state court proceedings.
And what was the final outcome after the Supreme Court intervened?
Following the Supreme Court's instructions, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals reconsidered the case, and on March 29, 2005, they ruled in favor of the state, confirming that the conviction must be reinstated. The long legal battle finally ended with Sally McNeil having to serve her full sentence.
She served her sentence at the Central California Women's Facility in Chowchilla.
And this raises an important question. After decades of incarceration and a life defined by violence and legal struggle, what does life look like for someone attempting to start over, particularly when the fallout of the original crime continues to echo through the family?
McNeil was granted parole by the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation on May 29, 2020, ending her time in prison. She now resides in Northern California.
She has begun to build a new life. She met Norfleet Stewart through her Veterans Transition Center support group, and they married in 2022. This suggests she has sought and found a structured, supportive environment outside of the military and bodybuilding subcultures that defined her earlier life.
And perhaps most importantly, the sources indicate a critical reconnection with her children, Shantina and John, following her release. She has also met her grandchildren. It's noted that both children attended her wedding to Stewart, symbolizing a step toward some kind of familial healing.
We have some brief details on Shantina. She's noted as a former Army staff sergeant and has one son, Donald. She, like her mother, pursued a military career, perhaps seeking that same structure McNeil originally did.
But the material also delivers a profoundly sad and tragic postscript, one that really underscores the relentless cycle of trauma this family has endured.
Yes. John Loudon, Sally's son, who was a direct witness and victim of Ray McNeil's violence as a child, was fatally shot in Augusta, Georgia on March 4, 2024. He was just in his early 40s.
That is just a devastating tragedy for the family. The sources state he was reportedly homeless at the time and suffering from PTSD. The loss of John, who lived through and testified about that horrific domestic abuse, suggests that the trauma inflicted upon him as a child manifested in lifelong struggles that tragically ended in a new act of violence years later. Our sympathy really goes out to the family for this continuous, devastating loss.
It connects the original crime to a narrative of generational suffering. The violence in that household on Valentine's Day in 1995 did not end with Ray McNeil's death or Sally McNeil's incarceration. It continued to inflict damage on the children who witnessed it.
The complexity of the case, however, it remains a point of public fascination and discussion. In October 2022, Netflix released a 3-part docuseries, Killer Sally, directed by Nanette Burstein, which brought this entire history, the muscle worship, the steroids, the domestic violence, the legal battles back into the public spotlight.
That docuseries underscores that this case serves as a touchstone for discussions about domestic violence, the psychological defense of battered woman syndrome, and how society and the legal system handles victims who eventually become perpetrators in self-defense.
This examination has walked us through a life trajectory defined by stark, painful contrasts. From a childhood characterized by abuse, a bid for structure in the military, the highly unusual and degrading career used to fund ambition, the unrelenting domestic horror, the complex legal fight hinging on a psychological diagnosis, and ultimately the devastating and continued tragedy for her children even decades later.
The discussion highlights the difficult intersection of chronic abuse, the debilitating effects of trauma, and the legal system's struggle to interpret self-defense when the physical evidence of the scene, like the alleged reloading of the gun, contradicts the narrative of immediate, split-second reaction driven by fear. It forces us to grapple with the difference between legal intent and psychological reality.
As we conclude our analysis of these sources, let's reflect one final time on that crucial detail mentioned early in the sources. Ray McNeil's friend, DJ Jeffers, explicitly warned Ray about the sawed-off shotgun in the house before the murder, a warning Ray dismissed with a laugh. This detail encapsulates how obvious danger can be to those outside a relationship, yet completely ignored by those inside. Consider how often escalating violence and clear warnings are brushed aside or minimized, not only by the victims, but by friends and community members on the periphery. This case serves as a stark reminder of the responsibility those on the periphery have when they recognize inherent, potentially lethal danger within a relationship before it is too late.
Thank you for sharing this material with us. It allowed us to analyze the profound implications of this very complex case.
Thanks for listening.